In this, what I'm hoping is to provide a really brief overview of what is available on our website, all of the information, and I'm going to do it in such a way that ought you go onto our website, you kind of will see the same correlated areas for sourcing information. So what I'd like us to begin with is to just imagine, the majority of people here tonight are family members. And I'd like us just to imagine from what is to what if. So what is often refers to some of those barriers that present themselves in terms of looking at post-school options, to what if, to imagine how to progress the options for our family member. So the first step is to start where you are. In terms of starting where we are, we learn and lean into what is natural, looking at the interests of the individual, engaging from a place of empowerment. So we're building upon the talents, the skills, the competencies that exist within the individual. We're listening to what the lived experience is of the individual, and we're trying to amplify the will and preference, the dreams and wishes of the person that we support, either within our family or professionally. I think this stage of imagining what is possible is often that which catapults us into this next area. And the next area that we have is one of planning. I like this quote from Henry Ford: whether you think you can or think you can't, you are right. And what that implies, of course, is that it's putting that time in to begin the process of planning. It's something that's quite big when we look at planning for our family member or an individual with intellectual disability. I want to point out that oftentimes it's not the disability or the impairment that limits the life experience of the individual, as much as the impact of the lived experience, that is how they have experienced education or employment or community, and that the planning itself often is recommended to begin early in secondary school, beginning with the individual, again, working to identify the strengths and the support needs. And you'll hear that from our panelists today in more detail. So identifying on an ongoing basis the skills for life, the areas in which the young person may need support. And within this time of planning, often in the final year of secondary school, a person from the HSE, an occupational guidance counselor, will administer the National Disability Authority profiling tool. And I often find in talking to family members that they haven't heard of this particular tool that's used as the transition is due to be made from secondary school. It's a tool that is to determine the next steps. And it's important to add, that the strengths of the individual may not be apparent in the use of this tool. It's like many tests or tools, it often can be deficit focused and look at just the struggles that an individual has. I often recommend that you add your own assessment, a profile of areas of strength, areas of support needed, and areas of growth that you, together with the person you support, anticipate or you can envision. Again, the profiling tool is something that I will send on to all of our family members after the session tonight, so that you can see for yourselves, if your young person is still in secondary school, kind of what that test, the questions that test asks of your family member. It's important during this time of planning too, to engage with your family member around hopes and dreams and ambitions. It's questions that we ask ourselves through life. What do we want to do next? What steps do we need to take? So it's setting goals and deciding on steps towards these goals. And you'll see in this section of the Inclusion Ireland website resources that there are references to CARIS education, the careers portal, education and training boards, the National Council for Special Education, and reference to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disability, in particular Article 19 around living in the community. And again, all of that resource material is on the website around this stage of planning. The next stage, the next area in which we highlight is education, and our panelists will speak more fully to this here shortly. And there should be a full integration of persons with disability in the higher education system, and that appropriate funding provisions should be put in place to support the policy. This is one of the many reports and guidelines and policies that come from the government. This one in particular is a report on the Commission on Status of People with Disability, a strategy for equality. Oftentimes, however, people will encounter a lack of guidance, a lack of information, not only at secondary school level, but third level, going into community, going into workplaces. Where can that information be sourced? How can we look at differentiation or adjusting the curriculum to support the person to achieve? Under Article 24 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disability, the right of education includes a full development of human potential, a sense of dignity and self-worth, strengthening respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms, and human diversity. Resources that are noted on the Inclusion Ireland website include the Ability programs, DARE, AHEAD, the Inclusive National Higher Education Forum, the National Learning Network, and many, many more. I just wanted to give a taste of some of the resources tonight, and don't worry if you haven't heard of them, because information is all there on the website. The next area is one of employment, and this quote by John O'Brien states that the common purpose as citizens is to contribute, each in our own way, to building communities, a life that works for everybody. We all look to a career, something that will be a way in which we will have an opportunity to express our skills, our passions, our competencies, our capacity. This right to employment gives a person with disability on equal basis with others a right to gain a living and work freely, and to work in the work market. We know that supports are needed, and some of those supports are outlined again on the website under community employment, employability, further education and training, job clubs, local training networks, open doors. The next area is within community, that people do not belong to systems, they belong to themselves, to their community, and to their family. And within this area of post-school options, perhaps a motto or a mantra that as family members is important to remember is that we work consistently and persistently and quietly to achieve the goals of our family member, to support them. An area in which we examine too the strengths of the individual is looking at what community activities is our family member involved in, where they do belong, and begin with what is strong within the individual, communicate the strengths and needs of the individual, build that confidence in terms of progressing and making choices within post-school options, making connections, working on those connections, those community relationships, as a person who goes to the local shop, or as someone who goes to all of the local hurling matches. So we're looking at ordinary places, ordinary activities, and everyday activities within community for individuals. Some of the resources on the website include Clan Bayo out of Mayo, the Inclusive Living Network, material on New Directions, which would look at the various pillars of strength to support somebody in the community, the National Platform of Self-Advocates, and so forth. So my last slide here before we launch into hearing from our panelists today is just to believe in possibilities, and those possibilities, some of which I've quickly outlined here, just in an overview, are printed on our website. So I'm going to stop there. And I'm going to invite Des Aston to present next on the Inclusive National Higher Education Forum. And also would like our attendees tonight, if you have any questions, comments that you would like to contribute, if you might put them into the chat, and I will moderate and bring those to our panelists. So thank you, Des. Go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. That's a great introduction as well. It sets the scene really for a lot of what we're trying to promote, and I think the other panelists will be in agreement with that as well. Let me just get set up here now. Can I ask, is that showing the full screen or the notes page?
The notes page.
Okay, let me swap that. There we go. That should be better. Okay, so just to set the context, I suppose, in my professional role, I wear two hats. I am employed as the National and Schools Coordinator, as I said earlier, with the Trinity Centre for People with Intellectual Disability. Within TCPID, as it's known, we run a level 5 certificate course for students with intellectual disabilities, with work experience built into the second year of the course, and opportunities for paid graduate internships afterwards. My other hat that I wear then is as the chairperson of INHEF, which I'm talking to you today as. And I suppose when I was talking about this webinar series and looking at the context of where it came from, and it was initiated by the parent group in Tipperary. So I looked at the geographic location and I thought, you know what, it would be of more interest to hear from my colleague Orla, who you'll hear from Mary Immaculate College, Limerick, and her graduate Maggie as well, who will speak. So I thought that would be more relevant to people given the geographic location today. But I'm going to give you a bit of context in terms of INHEF and what we are trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. That might set the scene then to allow Orla and Maggie talk about their program and their experience on the program. So what do we know? We know that people with intellectual disabilities are much more likely than their non-disabled peers and I don't like that expression, but for lack of a better term, they're more likely to be placed in day services. When I say day services, I'm talking about the health funded, the HSE funded day services for adults with intellectual disabilities. In case this is, there we go, sorry. So they're also more likely to be unemployed with just 6% in paid employment. They live with an increased risk of living in poverty. They're more dependent on social welfare and disability allowance. And there's very little expectation historically within the Irish context for them to progress on to further or higher education. Legislation has changed over the last 20 years within Ireland to be more inclusive. But as we all are acutely aware, with the introduction of new inclusive policies and legislation, there is a delay in actually seeing the effects of that. The one I've highlighted in green here for you all tonight is the EPSN Act, the Education of Persons with Special Educational Needs Act, which was introduced in 2004. And I suppose why that's very relevant now is that that policy gave, or that legislation gave, young people with special educational needs and intellectual disabilities, in this case, the right to attend mainstream primary and post-primary school in their community. So they were able to attend school with their brothers and sisters, with their neighbors, with their peers, within their local community. And why it's very relevant today is that all those young people who were able to avail of that legislation and that change are now turning 18 years of age. And now we're looking at the point where, okay, they've had the opportunity to attend a mainstream primary school and a secondary school. And as Patria outlined earlier, it's like falling off the end of a cliff with very little resources, very little systems or structures put in place to support them into adulthood as it's recognized at 18 years of age. And just to point out, the EPSN Act does cover people up until the age of 18, and then they must enter adult services. And I suppose that's where the HSE guidance person that Patria mentioned comes in at that stage to profile them and to assess them for their supports within the adult services. For anyone who's not familiar with the education system in Ireland, I thought I'd just run through it very quickly. So on the left here, we have what we call our mainstream system. So within the green, we have primary school that typically young people will enter at 5 years of age, 4 or 5 years of age, and they're there roughly until they're 12 years of age. Then they'll enter into the lower secondary stream, which is also known as the junior cycle, from age 12 to 15 years. At the end of that 3-year cycle, they do a leaving certificate or a junior certificate exam, which is a state exam. Then they have a bit of choice going into the upper secondary, or also known as the leaving certificate. On the left, the LCE, the leaving cert established, is the traditional leaving cert as we know it. We all know that's a very high stakes, pressure-filled exam, and is often the most common route to getting into university in Ireland. There's also the Leaving Cert vocational program, which is an added element to the traditional Leaving Cert that allows people to get some extra skills in vocational skills and work readiness skills. The lesser available option within the upper secondary system is the Leaving Certificate Applied. There's a very small number of schools in Ireland that actually offer this program, but it has been more for young people who are thinking about apprenticeships, traineeships, and that sort of thing. With the LCA, you can't actually apply for a place in university. On the right, then, we have the special education system in Ireland, where young people with special educational needs enter school at 5 years of age and they leave school at 18. As I mentioned, that's when the EPSN Act officially stops for those young people. So then leaving compulsory schooling. This is a very loose and general kind of diagram just to kind of show the traditional routes of where people typically would go. But I know there are instances where people wouldn't take these routes and they'll go different directions. But typically it kind of looks like this for the mainstream system. So from the traditional Leaving Cert and the Leaving Cert vocational program, typically people go on to higher education, and we have a very high rate of progression to higher education in Ireland. Some people then might go on to further education from that route. A few will go on to direct employment and a few to PLC courses as well, and then some to traineeships and apprenticeships. So lots of avenues open to people who go through that number one upper secondary box there. For those who do Leaving Cert Applied, it's slightly less options available to them. As I mentioned earlier, the majority tend to go to traineeships or apprenticeships. Some will go on to PLC courses, so that's a post-leaving certificate course, usually at level 5, which is the same level as the Leaving Cert established. So it might give them an extra year to specialize in a PLC course at the same level that they were studying in school. On the right, then, we see that from the special education school system, traditionally over the years and historically, it has been straight to disability day services. And these are the HSE services that I mentioned earlier. So we do have some new evidence and some anecdotal evidence before that, I suppose, in terms of people with intellectual disabilities in Ireland, when they're leaving school, typically they will have the equivalent of a level 3 certificate or a couple of modules or subjects at level 3 on the national framework of qualifications. Their peers who have gone on to do a Leaving Certificate or LCVP will have achieved a level 5 certificate. And I suppose this is a huge gap where we see people with the Leaving Certificate being able to apply to the CAO system, get their points on the CAO system and apply for university. Then we know people who go on to university, there is statistically a much higher success rate of finding meaningful and well-paid employment. So there is a huge gap then between young people with intellectual disabilities leaving school with the level 3 certificate and trying to get on that employment ladder and getting into a meaningful career. So internationally, there is 3 kind of models of inclusive third level education that are recognized within the literature. And the reference is down on the bottom right corner there. It's Hart et al. 2006. So I suppose the first one here on the left is the mixed hybrid model, where students participate in social activities and or academic classes with students without disabilities. They participate in classes with other students with disabilities. And this model typically provides students with employment experience on or off campus. In the middle, we have the substantially separate model. This is where students would participate only in classes with other students with disabilities. Students may have the opportunity to participate in generic social activities on the campus, and they may be offered employment experience, often through a rotation of pre-established employment slots on or off the campus. And the last one there, the inclusive individual support model, where students receive individualized services in college courses, certificate programs, and or degrees for audit or credit. The individual student's vision and career goals drives the services, and there's no program base on campus. So if we take a look at this map of Ireland here, on the left, I have the numbers of programs that have been running in Ireland. In 2014, we started off with a scoping exercise, I suppose we could call it, from Saran McGuinness from Maynooth University and Fintan Sheeran from Trinity College, where they discovered that there were 16 programs of inclusive education for people with intellectual disabilities, specifically in Ireland. I took up my role within Trinity Centre for People with Intellectual Disabilities in 2018, and I did a scoping exercise at that point, which I found there was 10 programs in existence. It was quite difficult to combine that data and to try and find information on these types of programs at the time. Often people who had been working in them moved on to other universities or other posts, and it was hard to keep track of, often moving to universities in other countries across Europe and worldwide as well. So it was very difficult to find this information, but we did discover 10 programs in existence. So in 2019, then the number stayed at 10, but there was actually one program that disappeared and a new one popped up, which was good that there was a new program there. But as of September 2021, we were down to 5 programs. A lot of this could be down to the pandemic as well. I know there was officially 3 programs that were paused because of the pandemic, but there was 8 discontinued. And I'm predicting through my colleagues within INHEF that as of September 2022, hopefully we're hoping there will be 7 programs back up and running, with and the process being in the process of either re-establishing or newly establishing 4 possible programs. Those programs are highlighted in yellow at the moment. So INHEF have been in conversations with the Technological University of Dublin in Tala, and Letterkenny IT, and Athlone Institute of Technology, which is now amalgamating with what used to be Limerick Institute of Technology. They're now the Technological University of the Shannon. However, there is a lot of goodwill out there. We have representatives from all of these institutions within INHEF. We meet 3 or 4 times a year, and we try and create a space for collaboration between different colleges and universities that are interested in inclusive education for people with intellectual disabilities at 3rd level. And I suppose we're trying to work together to have a shared vision and to have core principles of inclusive education that can inform and be embedded within the higher education sector in Ireland. So although all these programs or these institutions don't currently run programs, there is representatives from these organizations and these institutions who are very dedicated and want to see this area progress throughout Ireland, which is very encouraging. So when I talk about having a shared kind of vision together, these are some of the things that we've agreed amongst us as a group within INHEF. Number 1 being creating educational contexts which celebrate and reflect societal diversity, with a particular emphasis on including people with intellectual disabilities within the landscape of further and higher education in Ireland. Number 2, creating meaningful educational opportunities that afford choice to people with intellectual disabilities to attend community-based rather than congregated settings. Number 3 of our core principles is to create multiple progression pathways which enable people with intellectual disabilities to transition to employment and or to progress to educational initiatives on the National Framework for Qualifications. Number 4 is creating appropriate quality assurance structures which are student-centered and driven by inclusive pedagogical principles and assessment practices. And number 5, removing barriers which inhibit full and meaningful access and engagement to 3rd level education for people with intellectual disabilities. These are also our shared graduate attributes amongst the different programs that are affiliated with INHEF. And at the top there, we have that our students will be knowledgeable, creative, responsible, collaborative, skilled, and confident. I'm going to leave you here with this slide before I pass you on to my colleague, Dr. Orla Slattery from Mary Immaculate College, Limerick, and one of her graduates, Maggie, who were introduced earlier. But if anyone would like to read more about the establishment of INHEF and what we stand for, you can Google the Ahead Journal, issue 13, the winter 2021 edition. We published a paper called Collaborating for Inclusion, a National Forum of Inclusive Higher Education Providers.
Thank you, Des. Before you leave us, there was a question that came in terms of options for a student with a level 2 learning program and in a special school in terms of pathway.
Okay, yeah, so INHEF is kind of the umbrella organizations that brings everyone together to look at kind of the policies and the barriers that are stopping people getting into 3rd level education. However, the entry criteria to each program is different, as each program is run independently by each institution. So I wouldn't know off the top of my head which institutions programs would qualify someone with a level 2 program. I can speak for ourselves in Trinity College. Our application, we do ask that students would have in or around level 3 qualification. And that's to ensure that we could bring them up to the level 5 certificate standard by the time they leave us 2 years later. However, we're one of very few programs that are actually at level 5. There are other programs around the country, off the top of my head, that were or are running at level 3. So a level 2 might be enough to get into one of those programs, but I would have to go away and look that up. I wouldn't have it off the top of my head.
Thank you, Des. And you'll stay with us if more questions come. You will.
Absolutely, yeah.
Terrific. Yeah. Thank you. Great. I'd like to invite Orla and Maggie to turn on your cameras and to continue the conversation and information sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Petria. It's a pleasure to follow Des. I apologize as the evening moves on, my voice is diminishing. So I hope that the conversation will be legible to all and accessible. So I'm just going to share our presentation that Maggie and I have been working on, which hopefully will give us some context for our discussion. So let me just see. So can I just check, Petri, is that gone full screen there? We should have a full screen.
Yes, view. It has.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And on behalf of myself and Maggie, it's an absolute privilege to be here to celebrate everything that we're speaking about in terms of inclusion. It's a pleasure to be working with Inclusion Ireland and the Parents Association. And also we do so much work with Des, and thank you so much, Des, and to the other speakers here for setting the context. It's such a pleasure to slot into the conversation at this point. So I'll begin by, if I may, introducing myself. I've done so already briefly, but just for those who may not know about the work that we do or the program that we have. So my name is Orla Slattery, and I am Inclusion Coordinator for Adults with Intellectual Disability at Mary Immaculate College. And it has been my great privilege to work with and learn from young people with ID over the course of more than a decade now. I coordinate the Certificate in General Learning and Personal Development, which is the main part I will be speaking to you about this evening, to tell you about some of the work that happens there, before handing you over to Maggie. And I do stress that really I see my only function here this evening as giving a context for the student voice, because Maggie and all of our former graduates are such wonderful ambassadors for this program. So I'm going to try and be as brief as I can with the view to handing over to her shortly. As part of my role on the program as coordinator and lecturer, I do a lot of curriculum design, and I design assessments to support the inclusion of adults with intellectual disability. And as Des mentioned, I also am a member of INHEF, and I do research to try and promote the inclusion of young people with intellectual disability through systemic barrier removal at both, an operational and a strategic level. So our wonderful CGLPD program, which is the abbreviation for the certificate program that we have, has a number of central aims that are very much in keeping with those that Des has mentioned in terms of the national forum, but also the broader international landscape that Petria has also identified in terms of the United Nations Convention. So the program we have aims centrally to create an inclusive progression pathway to higher education in the college. We aim to empower people with ID, and something that Petria said at the beginning really struck me, where she was talking about or mentioned that very often we look at disability in terms of deficits. And I think we would all be united here this evening in moving beyond that kind of deficit focus and moving towards a strengths-based approach. So I suppose one of the things that we try and do is to empower people with ID, focusing on their strengths, unique talents, and abilities to achieve their personal life goals. We believe that doing this aims to create a more just and equitable system of education for everyone. We feel that this program really enriches our college community holistically, and not only is of benefit to the learners who come onto the program, but is of benefit to everyone within our learning community, both students, faculty, and management. And the program also aims to create a rich learning environment, in which everyone's contribution is valued. So very much a celebration of strength, capacity, and ability. There's been some talk about the National Framework of Qualifications. I think it's important perhaps just to contextualize the certificate in that context. Des had mentioned there that many school leavers will have achieved, in often cases, a level 3, and those with LCA have very often achieved a level 5. So our program is actually a level 4 on the National Framework of Qualifications. And we have developed a partnership with the QQI through the Limerick and Clare Education and Training Board to accredit our program as a level 4 2-year certificate program for learners who come onto the program. And you'll forgive that very dense visual there, but I just wanted to be as accurate as I could about the substance and the structure of the program. So the program is offered over 2 years, and the students undertake a total of 9 modules. So it's quite an academic program wherein they work a lot with literacy, we work a lot with numeracy, and so it's quite an academic piece of work. The students do wonderful projects, they do presentations, they do skills demonstrations, and it's wonderful to see time and time again what these wonderful students achieve when the barriers are removed for them to do so. So it's quite a robust academic program, but one centrally that aims to enhance the holistic development of program participants. So how do students on the program learn? This is a question that I am frequently asked when I speak about the program. So there are a number of ways in which we work with and learn from our students to support their learning development. Teamwork is an essential component of the learning environment in our class in Mary Immaculate College. So we really try to create a positive learning environment where students are empowered to work together, to respectfully communicate and learn from each other. Independent study is also a feature of the program. So at level 4, what we're expecting there is that students are not necessarily at the point where they've become fully independent learners, but that they are moving into that space. So there's a lot of scaffolding provided, but our general aim is that we're welcoming learners who are ready to make the transition to becoming as independent as they can in their studies. We provide a lot of interactive and hopefully very enjoyable guided instruction, and we have a number of different wonderful lecturers who come in and deliver the different modules. I teach and coordinate too, so it's wonderful to be in the classroom with the students. And just, I suppose, I couldn't speak to you this evening without saying a word on blended learning, which I'll explain in a moment, which basically means working online and in class, because I think one of the things we're all abundantly and almost painfully aware of, having gone through the last 2 years since the COVID pandemic, is how everything, the digital pivot as we're calling it in academia, how everything had gone online. And how difficult and how challenging that had been for this group of learners in particular. But we did go online and we had a fantastic adventure and we've learned a huge amount. So through that learning, we're really eager to ensure that the future students that we're welcoming to our program will become skilled digital citizens, because we know how important this now is for not only as a life skill, but for employability and for education. And blended learning and going to college really do go hand in hand at the moment. And I know very often people will say there are, that this is maybe an additional barrier for people with an intellectual disability who may not have had the opportunity to engage in or to have received much training in digital literacy. So one of our key aims for students coming onto the program is that we will provide training throughout the program in the use of digital literacy. So by that, I mean, essentially the students are working in class every day. We have our laptops out because we don't want to let all that training and learning go. So it will be a priority for us moving forward that we are incorporating digital technologies at every level of the program offering, because there's so much accessible technology that can really facilitate student learning development. So just to say there that the CGLPD is a program of blended learning, which means that we offer instruction and support students through the use of technology in class and online. So we have, I suppose, a number of different strategies at play at once. So laptops are used to help support student learning development, and we've been very lucky in being able to avail of the student laptop scheme in the college, through which we were able to get all of our students laptops for the duration of their studies with us. And as I suppose, as a very important life skill, all students are encouraged on this program to develop ICT skills, as we know, following on from the pandemic, just how important digital literacy and ICT skills are as a part of being a citizen, as a part of adult life. But just before I leave you, I just wanted to share with you just, I suppose, a little vignette of one of the highlights of our year in Mary I. And unfortunately, like everything else, our graduation ceremonies had been online and not in person. But we're hoping to return to in-person graduations in the future, because there's nothing quite like it. But one of the highlights of that ceremony every year in the Faculty of Education is that the students from this program receive their awards with all of the other students in the Faculty of Education. And it is a very proud moment, not only for us on the program and the life of the college, but for the wonderful students that come and work with and learn with us. So I really like to share that, because I think it just does speak to the inclusivity, it speaks to ability, it speaks to what can be achieved through systemic barrier removal when we work to include students and have a belief in their capacity to achieve their goals. So I haven't gone into the specifics of the entry criteria. I know that was a question. I can come to that at the end. And at the end as well, I will be telling you about an information evening that we will be having. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But it gives me great pleasure to introduce our CGLPD Ability Ambassador, Maggie, who is now going to speak to you and share with you some of her journey. And Maggie, I'm going to assist you. So if I'm too slow or too fast with the slides, let me know. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks so much,
Maggie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maggie McHugh, and I'm also known as Maggie May. And I am a former graduate student of the Certificate in General Learning and Personal Development program. My work as a disability advocate within the international fetal alcohol spectrum disorders community includes helping teachers, parents, social workers, and others with FASD understand what it is like by talking about my own personal journey of having FASD, and helping them find strategies that help the day-to-day living become a little bit smoother through my work of lecturing, podcasting, mentoring, and my YouTube channel, which a link has been included. So if you want to check it out, feel free. And I also have the privilege of being one of the ability ambassadors for the CGLPD course in Mary Immaculate College. Benefits of inclusion in college life. Through the program being facilitated within Mary Immaculate College, I was able to get the full student experience, such as joining societies. And in fact, I was the first person with a disability to take over the running of the Writers' Society within Mary I. And me and my family always have a bit of a giggle, as I am dyslexic, so we kind of find it pretty funny that I ended up running a society all about writing. But at the end of the year, we did produce a poetry and short stories booklet where multiple students from the CGLPD course, but also students from all over the college submitted their work and had it printed. So that was very exciting. And also, I guess, not just through my society, but also as the CGLPD course rep, I was able to, I guess, solve any issues that came about through working with the student union and, you know, just finding ways to resolve the issues to allow the students to have the best, positive, most smoothest college experience possible, really. And on my second year, I got to go on work placement at the international office in Mary I. And I guess some of my jobs were I got to assist in helping the study abroad students settle into the college. I also furthered my social media studies through learning how to advertise events such as the Brazilian Carnival that the international office hosted, which is where the picture was taken. with me and a few of my colleagues. And it was just a really fun day where we all kind of got to dress up and try different Brazilian foods and listen to Brazilian music. And it was definitely one of the highlights of being on work placement. So some life skill developments. So while I was a student on the program, I learned how to travel independently on public buses to get to and from the station, and then to get from the station to the college. As I didn't live nearby and I'd never traveled on my own before. So it was quite an exciting adventure, I'll say. I also learned how to become quite the expert at using Google Maps with about 90% success rate of not getting lost. And I also learned that I had to be wise in spending money, as it really doesn't grow on trees. So I always had to make sure I had enough money to, buy lunches and snacks, but more importantly, have enough money to get my very, very large coffee every morning, which was a must. So for me, that was my first time learning how to make wise money choices and not always just impulse buying. Also, I suppose as a student, I was expected to be able to make sure that I was always on time for my lectures and to not, be disruptive if I was ever late. So for the first couple of weeks, I had to figure out a way around the college, and get into a routine of knowing when was the best time to go to the college shop. And I was by far their most faithful customer. And by the end of the 2 years, I had nailed when to go to avoid any of the long queues. But I suppose once I got a routine, it was a really wow moment for me. As before being on the course, my time management was non-existent. And I suppose I was never on time for any events or appointments. So it was quite a go Maggie moment. And I suppose transferable skills development. I suppose having any disability, but in particular an invisible disability, can be very isolating, as you're often faced with barriers each and every day, from having to fight for the right that the people around you just believe that you have a disability, and also just having to fight to receive help that you need in order to be able to participate with your peers on an equal level. So I suppose being on the CGLPD program, for the first time, I experienced none of that. In fact, it was the complete opposite. Me and my invisible disability were accepted and my needs were met. And for the first time, I didn't have to have a guard up and, try and think of ways that I was going to have to fight for supports, because they were already in place. So the only thing I really had to think about was just being a student, and making lifelong memories, which I did. And even looking back, I have only the most fondest memories of being a student and being on the course. And I suppose the opportunities that I got being a student on the CGLPD course, it really made me who I am today. Before participating on the course, I would never have had the confidence to give presentations like I'm doing now. I wouldn't have, talked to people or even let people know that I have a disability. I wouldn't talk about my FASD. I never imagined I would become an international advocate and speaker. I suppose through my journey on this course, I have learned so many life skills that will be there for the rest of my life, from, having confidence to travel on public transport, to, 90% of the time not getting too lost. But, I also learned other skills like learning how to interact with people where there may be a language barrier, from my time in the international office, and just little things like that. The course really allowed me to thrive in an environment where my needs were met as an individual, But to the rest of my peers, I was just like any other student. I wasn't made to feel different or stand out from the rest of the students in the college. I suppose I now have the confidence of advocating in a workplace or anywhere, as for the first time I experienced what it was like to not have to fight for my needs to be met and not having to justify that I have a disability. And I got to experience what it was like, the fact that when the right scaffolding is in place, I can succeed. I graduated, I experienced so many life firsts. Yeah. And I suppose what I came away from being on the course was the fact that having a disability isn't a negative for me anymore. In fact, I embrace it. You know, I couldn't imagine myself not having my disability, you know, and not, these days I look forward to the challenges that come with my disability, because I get to find ways of, you know, overcoming it or finding strategies. So yeah, I suppose I want to thank you all for listening, and I want to thank Inclusion Ireland, Connect Family Network, and Down Syndrome Ireland for hosting this fantastic event. And I also want to thank Orla for making the 2 years on the course such a blast, and also letting me come and co-present with her tonight. So thank you, and I will give you back to Orla.
Thank you, Maggie. It's an absolute pleasure, and I have the dubious honor of trying to follow you now to finish up, which is a very hard job to do. So thank you, Maggie, for your time and your expertise and for your generosity of spirit always in sharing your stories with us. So thank you so much. And I would strongly encourage those present just to maybe have a look at Maggie's YouTube clips as well. She's doing lots of work in the community, and it's just very positive. So we didn't, as I said, go into too much detail about the recruitment process. I'm delighted to say that we are in a position to go ahead and that we will be welcoming students. Unfortunately, our numbers are limited. But with that said, we will be having an information online event at 7 p.m. on April the 13th, which is actually Easter week. So I hope that will suit people. And so if anyone has any questions or would like to be involved in that, please send me an email and I'd be happy to send you on the registration details. So thank you very much to all involved for the pleasure of being here, and we look forward to liaising with you further. Thank you.
Orla and Maggie, thanks very much for your input this evening. It's hugely informative, and also I think can inspire possibilities for people to think and consider. I know we had a couple questions there that were around recruitment and numbers, and I suppose that varies from year to year. Orla, I don't know if you wanted to address, in terms of places available, how people are selected, if that can be done briefly, or if
sure, with pleasure.
A student who has a level 2, can they be admitted to the program, or
okay,
a criterion?
So just firstly, if I may, in terms of our numbers, as I said, our numbers are limited because we try and keep the numbers low so that we can provide adequate supports to everybody in the class. That's an important part of the provision. So we generally have a cutoff point of 10 students in any one intake, which allows us to support everybody. So for that reason, we have to limit it, and for funding reasons. But in terms of the entry criteria, because the program is a level 4 and we're asking students to do project work, we're asking them to do presentations, we're asking them to engage with numeracy, one of the entry criteria is that students would have 3 level 3 programs already complete. So that could even be junior cert subjects. It doesn't have to be applied leaving cert, but it would be very, very important, I think, in everyone's interest, that it would be the right next step. So I think there's a lot of level 3s in the community. The reason ours is at a level 4 is because there was no level 4 in our community. And I suppose with that then comes appropriate placement for somebody for whom it would be the right next step. And equally, we might also have students for whom the level would be too low. So I suppose we try and meet everybody where they're coming from. In terms of the application process, we ask students to complete an application form and then to attend for interview. And I anticipate possibly, although I'm hoping not, that those interviews may be online this time around, but we're hoping that it will go well and that people will understand, I suppose, just as we've had to be so flexible with COVID, we'll do our very best to accommodate everybody.
And can those applications come from other parts of the country than just the Limerick area?
There's no stipulation to say, you know, they can come essentially from anywhere. We've had students from Cork, we've had students from Galway, we've had students from Tipperary, happily many wonderful students from there. The only thing I would say around that, being realistic in terms of the logistics of traveling to and from, that's obviously an important consideration for family members and maybe agency supports, so that, you know, in principle, I would say we would welcome and we do welcome applications from everywhere, but just in terms of the feasibility of getting to and from Limerick, you know, that's something I think that every applicant would maybe have to consider for themselves.
And one final question before we move on to Melda and Maya. Actually, maybe two. Where can you attend a level 3 program? And within your program, are there grant and financial aid opportunities?
Okay, so in terms of the level 3, we work in close partnership with a lot of agencies in the community, like the Brothers of Charity and Enable Ireland. And I'm aware that there would be a number of level 3 offerings within those settings. In terms of community contexts, I don't know off the top, you know, in other community contexts, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure that information would be available if we were to consult maybe websites pertaining to further education and training. A lot of the level 3 work happens in different settings. But in terms of the financial piece, unfortunately, we don't at the moment have financial support for students on this program. And in fact, just another important point to mention in the interest of transparency, regrettably, it is actually a fee-paying course, which can present a barrier, and there's no point in pretending otherwise. But for us, I suppose we're actively campaigning to secure public funding, which we haven't managed to do yet. So we're hoping that when our funding model changes, that the financial provision to students will also change, because I think we believe very firmly that financial barriers should not be a barrier that prevent people from coming to college. And unfortunately, at the moment, that is a concern. So regrettably, I'm afraid we don't have that financial support for students.
Thank you. Thank you, Orla. Maggie, Des, you'd like some input there, and then we're going to move quickly on to Blossom.
Yeah, just very quickly, I just wanted to add that there, within the INHEF affiliated groups, there are other level 3 programs happening in institutes of higher education. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember, I think TUD Blanchetown campus, I think their program is at level 3. Dundalk Institute of Technology have a program that I think is level 3. And there might be one or two others. They're available on the INHEF website.
And could the two of you give me a range in terms of costing for the courses?
Yeah, at the moment, our course, there's an annual course fee of €1,500 per annum over 2 years. And I'm unsure. I think there are fees in other centres as well, but I'm not entirely sure of the structures there. But in terms of our one, unfortunately, that is the course fee per annum at the moment. As I say, hopefully if our funding situation changes, we would love to be revising that moving forward.
Yeah, and very quickly on that, as I mentioned earlier, all the programs are run independently by the different higher education providers. But I suppose the important piece around the paying the student contribution or the fees is that they're entitled to the same supports and services that are on offer to all students within the institution. Then it entitles them to their student card within the institution, and that's a very important piece for, I know, our own students and your students as well, Orla. You know, that day of getting your student card for the first time is a very important day, and right up until the graduation day, which is also another important day.
And just a very quick follow-up, I think, Des, you know, there's many students rightly or wrongly, everyone are paying fees in college at the moment of some description. But as you say, it does enable us to ensure that the students have access to the same full range of supports as members of the college community. So thank you very much.
Good. Thanks a million. Much appreciated. Now we'll move on, Maya and Imelda, to Blossom Ireland. And again, if you have questions, either to enter into Q&A and chat. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us here.
Sorry, can everybody
Okay.
see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
I'll start off. Thanks to Orla, Maggie and Des. That was really insightful and interesting. I know it's getting late, so I'll try and keep everyone with us. So my name is Imelda Fitzpatrick, and I'm the Programme Director with Blossom Ireland. And we are an organisation that work with young people with an intellectual disability between the ages of 14 and 25. And we're here today to chat to you about our programme that we have running called My Blossom Channel. And this has been established over the last 2 years, and it's been a way for us to launch our programs out across the country to young people with ID. And our area that we focus on is that transition planning area and the skills that are needed and are often not tackled anywhere else when a young person is thinking about or starting to think about leaving school. So from the age of 14, and then we work with young people all the way up to 25 at the moment. So I suppose Blossom Ireland came about and was started by parents initially, and was working delivering therapy-based supports. And then after a series of focus groups with parents and young people, there was actually a huge need identified in this transition planning area for young people with ID that were planning on leaving school. And there was just, parents and young people themselves were just quite stressed and anxious and didn't really know until the time they were going to leave what was going to happen, what the options are. And the parents and the young people felt that there were areas that they needed to learn new skills and things they needed to address that just weren't being done. So the program started out trying to address those gaps, I suppose, and we did that on site with young people. And then COVID hit and we had to do a bit of a U-turn, and just like everybody else, we decided to try and go online, and we weren't sure how it would go. So over time we put a learning management system together. We got the input from occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, young people with ID, and we formed a platform that was accessible for even non-readers, because we found that a lot of the young people that we work with aren't actually reading, and that was a huge barrier to accessing any kind of online content. So I suppose a lot of the young people we worked with initially during COVID were people who were really in this place of limbo where their services had shut down, where they weren't accessing school. And I think this came at a really good time for them, where they could continue their education in some shape or form and get some sort of control back in their lives again. So yeah, we developed 2 courses and they're running at the moment, and we have 2 that are currently being developed as well. So the 2 that have been run and successfully run are Assertiveness and Self-Determinism, I suppose, and knowing what you like, what you don't like, what your opinion is, how to ask for supports, how to talk about your own disability in an empowering way, are really such huge important factors of successfully transitioning from school to whatever it is you're doing after school, and making sure that that the young person themselves is at the helm and they're making the decisions and they're able to voice what it is that they want. So the Assertiveness course and the Uniquely Me course really aims to teach those skills, and it does it in a group environment with peers, and the peer-to-peer feedback element is really huge. So young people will give each other feedback on their assignments or work that they've done, or their opinions that they're giving, and we found that has just been a huge part of the learning for them and a huge part of what makes it enjoyable also. Yeah, you can go on to the next slide there. Sorry. So
So,
assertiveness.
yeah,
Sorry, Maya, you go ahead. Yeah.
No, so the Assertiveness course is the first one we developed a little bit over a year ago, and it's in duration of 7 weeks. And the aim of this course is to empower young people with intellectual disabilities to successfully practice assertiveness in everyday life. What we do is we teach them to recognize their character strengths and differentiate them from physical strengths. We support them to talk about their likes and dislikes and to explain them, to present their opinions, to listen to other people with other opinions in a respectful manner, to understand that people have different opinions, and that's okay. We support them to learn how to get their message across in a respectful and efficient way, and how to talk about themselves. Next course is called Uniquely Me course, and it's in duration of 8 weeks. So during this course, we try to empower young people with ID to be able to recognize that they have a disability, but not as something bad, to recognize that disability is a significant part of them, but only small parts of them. We support them to learn how to voice their opinion, to talk about their disability, or to refuse to talk about their disability, to recognize their strengths and all of the people and technology around them that supports them in their path, to learn about disability pride, and to make decisions. We noticed real importance of this course specifically because a lot of young people had really negative experiences when talking about their disability or encountering disability for the first time in their life. We had a young gentleman with Down syndrome who said that it was a really sad day when I found out I had a disability. So we work with those young people to understand what disability is and to understand all the amazing things that make them unique and individual. After 6 months of conducting Assertiveness course, we have conducted research on data we got from 51 participants, ages 15 to 25. Most of our participants have never done any sort of online learning before, and results have shown a strong impact of our course on development of assertiveness. So we analyzed the information we got from participants themselves through their self-assessments and from their champions. So champion is a person that supports a participant on our course, whether it's a key worker, a family member, sibling, parent, family friend, neighbor, somebody that young person trusts. And we also got information that champions noticed development of assertiveness away from learning experience, so in everyday life. And Melda?
Yeah, so what is My Blossom channel then? So My Blossom channel is made up of 4 main components, and we found that through trial and error, this is what works. So we have everything is we use the principles of universal design for learning. So everything is highly accessible. We use a lot of video content. The video content is of young people with intellectual disabilities as well, speaking to our young people with intellectual disabilities. It's not us, or it's not, older adults just telling them to do things. We have like gamification and quizzes that are very accessible. And I suppose for the online component as well, what we found is there's just been a huge amount of learning in terms of their computer skills and computer literacy, and being able to navigate a learning management system, and to even do things like, drag and drop or scroll, make decisions and discriminate between different answers, which we believe will help them going forward in the future, and is just a really great thing for them if they do decide to do any further learning. The other thing then is we meet up on a weekly basis, and we found that we don't have any more than 6 young people in each group, because we found that works very well. It gives everyone the opportunity to voice their opinion and to be able to contribute in a significant and positive way, I suppose. At the moment, for some courses, the meetups are happening online, and they're going really well. They're set up in a way that we've really thought about the accessibility part of them. So there's movement breaks, they're highly visual, there's music involved. We used a lot of the young people's interests, so each group will be different, because we'll find out what the interests are, and the each will make an effort to make sure that each group is engaging for the young people that are in them. And then the other thing is that I spoke a bit about already is that peer-to-peer feedback and interaction is just so important. Every week young people will give feedback to another young person on their program about their work, and they're learning to give feedback and to give their opinion and to take and to listen to different opinions, and that's been a really important part of the learning as well. So the supports that we provide through the courses are we provide supports to the young person themselves, and then we also provide supports to Maya has spoken about the champion. So the champion was a really important part of this, and there was no point in us kind of just doing the course and then with the young person and that was it. By working with the champion, then we have someone else that's working with them on a daily basis outside of the time we are and well beyond the time we are, that has been able to learn alongside the young person and to be able to support them, and then maybe to support other young people with similar things also. So we work with teachers, SNAs, care workers, key workers in disability residential settings. Siblings have been very important as well. We've had brothers and that have worked with their brother, and just we found that there's a nice new relationships that can happen there as well during that support. And something else that we've also brought in currently is digital badges. So each young person, when they complete a course, they will get a digital badge, which they'll always have, and which they'll always have a list of all the skills that they've learned during the course and what they exactly have mastered. So I suppose the courses that we provide aren't there to sort of just give an accreditation or similar as to maybe other education settings. We're really about preparing young people so that they can then start to attend further education settings or start work or start that next step, and just kind of filling in the gaps there for those skills that they'll need to go on and do those things.
So just a few years ago, our reach was quite small. So we were working only with participants in Northern Dublin, just because all of our courses were delivered on site. And because of COVID, we went online. And because of that, we were able in the last year to support 80 young participants on our course and their families over 12 counties in Ireland. So like we said, we have 2 courses going, and we are currently developing 2 more courses. However, I just want to talk a bit here about our impact. So in addition to developing the skills we targeted with our courses, we noticed that our impact went beyond what we expected. In addition to empowerment of young people with intellectual disabilities, we were able to see development of computer literacy skills as well. Champions often reported of improvement in relationships with young people they were supporting, especially in case where the champion was a sibling. We had a lot of situations where our participants were supported by their brothers or sisters, and parents told us there was a positive development of relationship there because they learned how to work with their sibling, how to support them and how to help them gain new skills. Parents and champions in general felt empowered to start the conversation about disability with the young person in a positive and a productive manner. We also witnessed the development of friendships between participants on the course, some of which stayed in touch after the course. Excuse me. So we can talk about our course, but I think that the best thing would be to hear from one of the parents from a young lady on our course. Bear with me, please.
It was lovely to see over the period of time how much more confident she is. In small little ways, like she stands a lot taller and she just seems to be much more relaxed and just happy within herself. It has given Anna the confidence and realization that she will find what she's looking for, being her own person and having her own identity. It was a great environment for her to express herself and not to be judged. Hopefully one day she will be a nail artist and that's what she wants to be. And I think she now thinks, yeah, I'll give it a go. Because before this, she was not accepting that she had a disability because she never saw herself as having a disability. It was sort of a no-no area we never talked about. And now she seems to be, yeah, so what? No big deal. Please give your child the opportunity to have this amazing conversation and an amazing ability to participate in a group, and you'll see the change 100%.
So there are a few components which make our blended learning program successful. And first of all would be having fully accessible learning platform. So participants on our courses have to do a bit of the work online on our learning management system, which is called My Blossom channel. We've made it fully accessible through use of different visuals, videos, limited amount of text, and having voiceovers. And like Imelda said, I think that key part here would be peer interaction as well. So all of the videos which model certain behaviors and activities on our learning platform were made by people with intellectual disabilities for their peers. We also think that another key aspect is presence of both individual and group-based interventions, and of course positive feedback provided by the group in combination with different role play activities, video modeling, immediate feedback, but most importantly peer interactions, which emphasize constructive feedback and encouragement rather than criticism. We use different methods to try to consolidate the learning. So we do that through discussions, brainstorming, case studies, and inquiry-based approach. Also, I think the most important thing to emphasize here is our individualized person-centered approach. So we always adjust communication to the needs and preferences of each participant, but we also adjust our content and teaching methods week by week. So we monitor our participants. We look at the videos they make as a form of assessment, and then we do whatever we can to adjust the learning materials to their needs and their preferences so they would enjoy it more and they would get as much from it as they can. I think another important aspect and outcome of our course to talk about here is goals and dreams of young people in our courses. So when we did Uniquely Me course with our pilot group, we realized that young people talked about their dreams for the future, especially when it comes to employment, as something that's, fun and interesting, but it's out there, it's unobtainable. That's not something that's realistically there for me. And after we work with them on actually realizing that the disability is not a reason why you shouldn't achieve your dreams, your goals, your ideal education, or ideal employment, decided to realize that their dreams are not just dreams, they're a possibility, they're a future. So I'm going to play another video from of our participants talking about their dreams for the future.
Dylan,
Yes.
what are your big dreams for the future?
To be good at football, definitely. I want to be a football referee when I'm older.
For me, I want to do like nail artist because I can get colours and different colours on my nails. So that's what I want to be.
My really big dream that I really want to achieve in the future is to be a really big and famous Hollywood actor.
My biggest dream for the future is to become a chef and cook lots of meals and desserts.
What's your favourite meal to cook?
Everything. Pizzas, chocolate mousse, brownies, and I like making cookies. Too much. I am unique.
After our participants told us about their dreams for the future, we took individualized approach to each one of them and worked on their personal empowerment. And at this time, a young lady, Anna, which spoke about being a nail artist, she is about to enroll in a course where she would have individualized approach to learning about nail art. Also, a young gentleman who said that his dream is to become a chef. He talked about it, and that was something that he's doing that's fun. But when it came to being a chef as a career, we supported him on that. And right now he's engaging in cooking class with National Learning Network. And also the young gentleman who said that he would like to be a Hollywood actor. on our course, he realized that he wants to use his skills to become a personal advocate for people with intellectual disabilities. We support him in that. And of course, our friends here in Inclusion Ireland have as well. So he's now lead on advisory committee for Ombudsman for Children. Imelda?
Yeah, so what's next, I suppose, we're in the process of developing 2 new courses. And I just kind of wanted to say as well that these courses are, you know, they're approximately 8 weeks, some of it are a little longer, but they are open to everybody, because we know that within this space, sometimes it can be incredibly difficult to navigate things and to find how you get onto things and how you can access them. These are, our shop is on our website, and you can click on and you can see what dates are there and for the courses, and literally buy them, and they're open to all young people with an intellectual disability. They're 90% covered by funding, and they're really very affordable. We have a study ready and a work ready course coming up that will work up specifically on the skills needed for starting college, and then also for going into and starting employment. So there's our information there, our website. Feel free to contact us by email or call. We're very happy to talk to anybody. And if you need any other information, just let us know.